Y'all know what it is.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Eggs. This week, we have Robert Clinkenbeard. Robert is the CEO of Radix Group. He is an entrepreneur, author, and four-time Ironman who has taken his business acumen and lessons learned in competition to not only sell his company, but kickstart an investment portfolio that contains several franchises, real estate investments, and the largest peer group facilitation company in the U.S. All that on top of raising a large family. Robert joins us today to share his knowledge to help our listeners find a reinvigorated passion for their businesses, build a corporate culture that is in line with their vision, and if you can believe it, do so while making more time for family and friends along the way. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Robert Clinkenbeard. How are you, Robert?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for the nice intro.
Yeah, glad to have you. Thank you for making the time to be here.
No problem.
Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your background? I know you grew up in Nebraska and moved to Scotland. Is that correct?
I definitely put people off with my accent. So I was born in Grand Island, Nebraska. I think it's a small town there. And probably when I was just over a year old, my parents, my dad was a Presbyterian minister, decided they want to move back to my mother's hometown in Glasgow in Scotland. So we took the ship across the ocean and ended up in the UK and spent most of my life across there.
I don't get too many people that are from Nebraska or born in Nebraska with as thick of Irish brogue as you've got going.
When I go through customs and immigration, I definitely confuse people handing them the American passport and having the accent, but it's usually funny.
Yep, no, that's awesome. Well, cool. So do you maybe mind, I guess, kind of starting at the beginning, telling us a little bit about your business? In the intro, we talked about your work now at Radix, but there was quite a journey getting there. So do you mind sort of talking about that or those early days and how we got to where we are today?
Yeah, no problem. So I decided after many years in Scotland, just felt as though there wasn't a good environment to start a business and join that entrepreneurial journey. So obviously lucky enough to have the dual passports. So I arrived in Phoenix back in '99 and really just, arrived with pretty much just a couple of suitcases, started working for a company. And then what amazed me was just the fact that all these people around Scottsdale, Phoenix, all had these second and third houses. And I'm thinking, how did they figure that out? And obviously quickly learned about the whole entrepreneurial journey. And I was working for a really large landscape company at the time called Valleycrest, and decided, well, I can maybe do this better. So I started up my business with my business partner in 2001. And, we would get up at, 3:30 in the morning and, obviously pretty warm in Phoenix. You have to start pretty early and really just started working out of a small lockup in Phoenix. And we were out there doing the work. We were cutting the grass. We were, trimming the shrubs, doing what you needed to do. And we slowly built that company up over, let me think, 15, 16 years to nearly 400 employees, $20 million in revenue. And, it was a tremendous experience, tremendous success. And I learned a lot from that.
So you went to college for horticulture in Scotland. Did you have an idea that you were going to be going into landscaping back then? Or is it something that you realized once you got to Phoenix and saw 1,000 lawn companies? Anyone that's been in Phoenix or Mesa knows that there's tons of lawn care companies down there. Is that something you just kind of decided once you got down there, or is it something you had in mind back in Scotland?
Not really necessarily. I was really open to anything when I moved across to the States. I arrived in Phoenix because I knew a couple people there, sort of distant friends. But, I was really willing to pretty much go anywhere in the States. And I think it was once I arrived there and I realized how much the city was growing and all the opportunities. And I just tried to, tried to figure things out. I mean, obviously going to horticulture college back in Scotland, where you deal with drainage and totally different plants, similar to the East Coast, and then coming to Phoenix. I mean, I just felt completely overwhelmed. Here I'm dealing with Phoenix, palm trees. I'm dealing with irrigation, so I just felt completely out of my depth. But typical Scottish attitude. I just got my head down and figured out, how do I make a go of this? So that's pretty much what I did.
Well, then let's talk a little bit about that growth. So, I mean, you started from this humble lockup there in Phoenix. Like Mike was saying, obviously there is no shortage of landscaping opportunities down there in Phoenix. But let's talk about how the business grew and sort of what the next steps were as you guys sort of started making your way into that market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we, our main focus was around professionalism. You see your typical landscape company, beat up trucks, no uniforms, that typical attitude. And we totally changed around. We brought in really professional trucks. We brought in a real sales process. We networked really well with a lot of the business groups. And almost took the landscape. We felt as though we took landscaping to another level or two within that Phoenix market. So yeah, we would do a lot of the landscaping during the day, and at night we would go out and we would do networking. We'd go to business groups. We would entertain our clients. Pretty much did whatever we did or needed to do, and then slowly we just started to get more and more jobs, and that took us eventually out of the field, and we started to hire more people just to help take us on. So we allowed us to work more on the business than in the business. So really just networking, doing a great job, just being out there, coming through on promises and making sure the quality there was just one of our success points.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's so funny because all those things that you're talking about, hard work, perseverance, networking, being friendly, living up to expectation, like they're the most common, most core principles, right? That just about any business should follow. Yet they seem really elusive. And especially in service businesses like landscaping or, anything like that, general contractors, it's those sorts of things are really what separate sort of the good from the bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and you saw that. We just saw that, even just other competitors with their beat up trucks, not returning phone calls, leaving shoddy work. We just felt as though there was an opportunity there to actually take care of our clients rather than just worrying about, making a lot of money.
Yeah. And I think that that's a wise thing too. I mean, even just that shift or that perception change where, the value really is in the customer, not even that much in the other piece. Now, granted, you have to do good work and all that stuff, but really it's how you treat your customers and that sort of lead to this ongoing growth and build good, build solid reputation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think the keys was, taking those relationships with clients up to a tier 4, tier 5 level. And what I mean by that is rather than just having a, very surface conversation, we were actually going out there. We were, taking them to events. We would go to the Phoenix Open. We would entertain them, we'd learn about their family, their birthdays. So they're really just taking those relationships to another level so that, when were in a crunch, whether their owners were coming into town, then we were out there making sure they were supporting them, making sure the properties look really good for those visits. So it was such a great relationship with our clients.
All right, I'm going to step out on a limb here and guess that you focused mainly on commercial properties, not residential. I don't see you taking a regular residential client out to a Suns game, for example. Is there a reason you stuck with commercial over residential, or did you do a little bit of both? What was your business like?
Yeah, we almost felt as though we skipped that step. A lot of companies will go into that residential market first, do all the lawns, and we just completely, jumped over that and went with the commercial. And even within the commercial, we were going after the grade A type buildings, all the office buildings, hotels, resorts. So we just took it up a level. And again, comes back to the professionalism, with their nice uniforms, with their trucks, with a cone around the vehicles, just simple things like that. So, when you look at some of the main business centers in Phoenix, Camelback, Central, all the beautiful resorts that are there, and we did a good majority of them. And then even things like, we did, there's a ton of HOAs out in that market. So we were going after a lot of those big HOAs, we were 10, 20 people full time every single day. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. Like so talk about a little bit the trajectory of this business then. So, I mean, you guys went from basically founding to, you returned to or got into Phoenix at 99, right? And so, but by 2001, you guys were one of the biggest companies in the Southwest. I mean, can you talk a little bit about just sort of that rate of growth?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't start our business until 2001. And, the first few years we doubled in size every single year. And, I think it was definitely challenging. We had, the typical challenges that most new companies have with finding the right people, finding cash to fuel the business, fuel that growth. But yeah, pretty much doubling every few, first few years. And then, there was obviously some setbacks. We went through that 2008, 2011 challenge. So a lot of our clients cut back on their services, a lot of our costs got cut back. And, one of the interesting things is that we actually, we're somewhat flying blind. John, my partner, and I we're not necessarily really savvy on the financial front. So we brought in a consultant to help us. And, he quickly identified in roughly 2007 that we weren't making any money on the big construction work. So all the big new HOAs, the retail centers that were being built, we would bid on a lot of the work. Quickly we realized we weren't making any money. Now, we were lucky enough to start to exit that side of the business before that 2008 crash. So we were, pretty grateful that was, we had somebody helping us identifying that weakness. But we got through that period. And, the nice thing about the landscape business, again, a lot of people think it's like dirty commercial business, but, you get that nice reoccurring revenue. So when you have that reoccurring revenue, you don't necessarily have those peaks and troughs with money coming in. So I think that helped us get through those tough times so that we come out in 2011, we'd start to rebound, bring in more contracts. A lot of our competitors were out of business. So it just allowed us to take up another quick growth spurt.
Yeah, so there's something in there that you've mentioned, and I happen to know you do some like business coaching and stuff yourself, but you took a moment, early on, you realized that you guys weren't sort of financially savvy and you decided to reach out to a consultant. And, it's one of these things I think for a lot of business owners that they just don't know what they don't know. So do you mind talking a little bit about like, how did you know it was the right time to find a mentor and how did you find one?
We knew that we were flying by the seat of our pants. And I think as we begun to join different organizations, I'm a big part of the Entrepreneurs Organization and business partners part of YPO. I think when we started to surround ourselves with other business people, then we sort of realized that we didn't know a lot of things. So we felt as though we should bring in a financial expert, which was our biggest area of weakness. So we just started to reach out to our network and we came across somebody who was a fractional CFO, and they came in once a month and just dissected the numbers for us and just give us a little bit more insight into where we were bleeding at the time.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned there that really stood out to me was you didn't realize you were losing money on the larger projects. And for me, I want to show you something here real quick. This is the door hangers that I'm passing out right now for my new lawn business, lawn care and landscaping business. And the bid process scares the hell out of me. Like I've done a lot of landscaping in my day. I've done my personal projects, my parents' house, a few other homes for friends and family kind of thing. And I've never actually done it as a quote unquote business. And right now I'm in the process of getting bonded and insured and all that fun stuff. But the actual bid process is super scary to me. because it's just one of those things that you can really mess up, and it could cost you a lot of money, and you could be paying to work if you do it wrong. And I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, the first few bids that you did, and maybe what we can do to not have issues like that where you are working for free. You know what I mean?
I think, all business owners make those mistakes. And, I think early on, everything is in landscaping is around hours. So making sure that, you're bidding enough hours. And a lot of times we underestimated some of the hours needed on certain types of jobs. We eventually, when the maintenance, we got into production rates. But yeah, we made a lot of huge challenges, or mistakes, I should say. But the way we saw it was, we're going to stick to those prices. We're going to show them some good quality work, and hopefully they'll stay on as a maintenance client. And then maybe in a year, then we'll look at our numbers. We'll look at some of the data, and then we'll hopefully go back to them and look for some type of a price increase. But unless you have that data. So eventually, I think probably after 8 years being in business, we felt as though we had so many spreadsheets and so many Word documents, it was just almost getting out of control. So eventually we brought in a ERP type system that just helped to, again, manage the routes, to do job costing, to do proper estimates. And those estimates would flow right the way through to the actual guys in the field. So eventually we figured it out, but it took us probably 8 or so years to really get some really accurate data around every single job. We were able to get job costing on almost on a daily basis, and it allowed us to make some great decisions.
At one point, you built your business to over 300 employees. Can you maybe tell us what it's like to have that many employees? And I've heard you equate it to rugby, like a rugby team. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think, the key thing with growing a business is making sure you have the right people. And, it's the same with any type of team, rugby team, soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. If you have the right people in the team and you find out what their strengths are and where they're struggling a bit, then you can go in and that's part of the reason why I became a coach, is that I have a good ability to be able to see the people in front of me and figure out which ones are the stars, which ones need a little bit more coaching. The goal is obviously to get them to work together as a team. There's just a lot more, you get things done better if they work together as a team. But sometimes you have to go in and give individual coaching on the individual players, whether it be in business or whether it be in rugby. So I think people is such a key element to your business. Unless you have the right people doing the right things, then your business is not going to be able to scale up.
So at some point, after you had this nearly 400 employees, you basically essentially sold this business, right? And so can you talk a little bit about what that process was like, transitioning from owner operator, guy who's out, beating the ground, trying to make the business happen. Then you built a business that could sort of stand without you, and now you're prepping it for sale. Can you just talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, it was a little bit forced upon me in terms of my you probably hear a lot of people, their partnerships begin to go sideways a little bit. So, we could start to recognize that. So we managed to hold it together and went out to, put our book together and put it out through a broker, investment banker. And we were lucky enough to, have a number of bids on our business, but it was definitely, if it wasn't for that partnership challenge, I'd probably still be in that business, but we were just on different pages. It was definitely a challenge, as once our business got sold in May of 16, going from that, I'm the go-to person per se for all of my team. Had, some senior managers coming to me, that it was then the strings were being pulled from the parent company now in Pennsylvania. So, the decisions I was making or decisions that were being made for me didn't necessarily sit well for me. Now, I lasted a couple of years, but it was definitely a huge adjustment for me. And what was actually more challenging for me is when I decided to exit that company completely in 2018. I felt as though my identity was pulled away from me. And that was a huge adjustment because, when you have, 16, 17 years working in that environment and everything's based in your laptop or your phone and, it's effectively the plug is pulled from that, then, I felt as though I struggled for 6 to 9 months with that identity crisis. So
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic to touch on. They say, I think, that the average American anyway will switch careers about 4 times in their life. But it's not too uncommon that you run into people who've maybe overstayed where they should have been. And, they're sort of afraid or whatever to make that decision. I don't know exactly how old you were when you made that choice, but can you talk about just the sorts of things that you had to reconcile in yourself to be able to make a pivot finally?
Well, I talk about this in my book where I feel as though you have to have people around you to help you with a lot of those decisions. So I actually decided to bring on almost like a personal coach myself, almost like a life coach, really just to identify what my purpose was in life. And that was probably, again, a good 6 to 9 month process. Is that what do I want to, how do I want to fulfill myself in the future? What do I want to do to the business community? And eventually we came up with a point where I wanted to make an impact on business owners, especially ones that are active, they have families. I see a lot of them struggle and make the same mistakes that I did. So to be able to go back into businesses and just help them through that transition, get them to be working more on the business and get them to work on a business where it's somewhat independent of them. So yeah, it was definitely a big challenge, but I think through the help of other people around me, I eventually found my way. But it took me a while.
Well, and how much of it do you think is just sort of the nature of things? I mean, this is a little bit my personal experience, but the line of work that I'm in is basically the trade that I had developed, right? It's the skill that I was good at. And so from its very nature, the very beginning, I was designed to be working in the business, not on the business, right? And so, and even now, I've been doing it for 15 years. We make a good living, we have a comfortable life, but there's a lot of stuff that I just have shortcomings on. I get too caught up in the daily work versus the actual, development of future work.
Right.
And so I wonder if it doesn't require sort of globally, I mean, I'm sure there are many exceptions, but if it doesn't sort of require a certain amount of time just burnt to even be able to reach the understanding that it's time for change. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Say that one more time again.
Well, so I'm thinking, like in your situation, for example, it took a bad partnership ultimately to drive you out. But I wonder, if obviously I don't know your experience in and out, but, if there's a certain amount of experience you have to have in a field before you are even capable of deciding that it's time to make that pivot, right? So you need to do a certain amount of work so that you could even recognize that your partnership was falling apart. And I wonder, or I guess what I'm trying to ask is if you think that maybe that's just kind of part of the process, part of being human and part of, our evolution as people is, putting our time into the things that we care about and then sort of, being capable of making those pivots later in life.
No, everybody, I think, goes through those challenges. It's just, I suppose the case is, at what point do you make that realization? Is a self-realization that, you're just working, you're exhausted, you've been working in a business for years, and you keep, you feel as though you're in that, that constant, what do they call it, the hamster wheel? Or if there's some type of external, whether it be a mentor, a coach, whether it be even some type of a life event, whether you or one of your family members has some type of challenge, that might be that trigger. But I think everybody goes through those types of challenges, or maybe they're just so beat up that they just continue with their head down and grinding away at what they do. So,
So, in your experience, do you think then, just sort of to conclude this topic or this point, I mean, looking back now, you've got a little bit of distance between, former you and the present you. I mean, was it worth making the pivot? Like, have you found that you're actually in a better place now than you might have been if you'd have stayed in that line of work?
no, absolutely. I feel as though, certainly, a couple of pivotal moments for me was, again, joining that EO group, again, being around other business owners. So they were the ones that pushed me to higher limits. And then, that challenge with my business partner. Again, I would come home at night and complain to my wife and kids. And, they probably didn't enjoy that for a long period of time. So it was just, going to different speakers, going to different events, and just having that light bulb moment that, hey, life's too short here. I'm not afraid of change. I'm not adverse to put myself through difficult challenges. So I'm just going to make that leap. Even coming back from Scotland across the US. I mean, again, that was a pretty fearful moment for me. But I came out of that on the other side with benefit. And the same with when I sold my business. Yeah, it was a challenging time, and probably took a couple of years between moving locations, moving across the country, trying to find my identity. But I'm now in a lot better place. My family's in a lot better place. So I'm really glad I made that pivot.
So you mentioned that you wrote a book. Is that the Iron Mindset? And by that, you're talking about the Ironman competitions, and I think you've been in a few of those, 3 or 4. Can you maybe talk about what it's like to train for an Ironman competition, and tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, I used to be a big soccer, and then moved into rugby, and still love rugby, but the body doesn't quite cooperate when you get a little bit older. So I just started to get into running just to sort of try and keep the fitness up. And I found this group of people within my neighborhood that were all doing triathlons. And, in the book, I talk about how, you can't really see me all that well, but I'm, 210 pounds. I'm a big rugby guy, pretty muscular, not a typical triathlete. So when I first started to even think about doing a triathlon, and this was a sprint, I could do literally one length of the pool, breaststroke, and even that was challenging. So I think just being around those people that really kept pushing me, and again, I had that sort of moment where I thought, well, maybe I can do this, and I started to get a swim coach. I started to get a bike, a run coach to help me, push me more, and I just started to go through different distance races. I started off with the sprints, and then I went to Olympics, then the half Ironman. I mean, some years I would have, literally 15, 20 races, all smaller to medium ones. And eventually I said, you know what, I'm going to go for that Ironman race. So it's, what I talk about in the book, and it's the same in business. If you set yourself that target, that stretching goal, and then you figure out, well, if I'm going to get across the finish line, and only 1.1% of Ironman people finish the race, then what do I need to do to be successful? So I started to build my training map. I had my coaches. I'd fit in 20 hours a week of training. So I had to make sure that my business was running somewhat independently of me. But it was definitely challenging when you're in Arizona and the daunting task of going out and biking for 5 or 6 hours, and you leave the morning and it's already 90 degrees. It's definitely messes with your mind. So that's why I started to talk about, when you have those types of challenges in business or any type of sporting event, there are challenges going to be thrown at you every single day. And what are the things that is going to just push you, allow you to lean into those challenges, those fears? And usually on the other side is usually some good things.
Can you maybe break down what an Ironman is? I know it's 3 different, you bike, swim, and run, right? But I don't know the distances. Can you maybe break that down for us?
Yeah, you start off with a nice small 2.4 mile swim, which is my worst. You go in, you get changed real quick, and then you jump on the bike for 112 miles. And then you come back, and then you're straight into your run. So you end up doing a marathon. So, your pros will do it, and, some of the quickest times are 8.5, 9 hours, but the cut off, 15, 16 hours. So it's a long day.
Yeah, that would be a long day, wouldn't it? uh, yeah. Anyways, I've done a 30 miler. I haven't done anything nearly as much as what an Ironman would be, but I rode my bike 30 miles one time, and it was out of the blue. A friend of mine was like, "Hey, let's go for a ride," and we're like, we just pick a spot, and I thought it was like maybe 10, 15 miles, but by the time I got back to the house, it was 30, and my legs were jello. So I can't even imagine what it would be like to do that swim, the bike ride, and then run a marathon. So yeah, props.
To call back to an earlier discussion, I just kind of want to make the point too that, as we were talking about coaching and finding people to help us, it's, very similar to your training in, for the Ironman. You're bringing in people who can help you with nutrition and who can help you, become a better runner, become a better swimmer, whatever it is. And so again, I think it's important to maybe just kind of, point that out. Just, we shouldn't be reticent to just get the people we need when we need help. If there's things that we want to be better at, don't be afraid to look outside of yourself, because I think it's a real easy trap to just think, okay, well, I know how to run. So if I just go out and run, I'll be all right. But having the proper training, having somebody tell you, oh, well, God, you can't run in those shoes. You're only going to make it 14 miles before you crap out. You got to pick the right kind of shoe, or, whatever it is, nutrition or any other facet. But I think it's worth mentioning anyway, this idea, just, again, coaching and the importance of sort of listening to other people.
I think a lot of people feel as though they have to immediately dive into hiring, especially in business, hiring a full-time expert. Like a controller, CFO type level. But there's so many options out there in terms of fractional people that are willing to come in for, a few hours a week, a few hours a month. So it's just a good way to at least get a taste of what that coaching looks like. And, there's so many people out there in the business communities, especially in the landscape community, where they're more than happy to help give their advice. They've been through that, they've made the mistakes. And I find that something really nice about the landscape community is that they're just willing to help and share their experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, you would hope to see that in most professional pursuits. I think you find, especially if you're involved in, entrepreneurial groups or industry trade groups, things like that, you find there are a lot of people who are pretty quick and willing to give up, advice or help you avoid pitfall.
Speaking about coaching, can you maybe tell us a little bit about the Radix Group and your consulting business and your partners that you work with, or not necessarily partners, but other coaches that you work with?
Yeah, so when I first started, I went through and got my certification through the scaling up with Vern Harnish. And I just felt as though it'd be good to hang my hat on, some big, coaching framework, because we use that in our business. So, the primary part of that was going in to help all the different types of businesses and do that initial evaluation to find out, where are their weak spots. I mean, a lot of people, because they're still down in the weeds, they're not necessarily seeing some of the challenges. So, that's where I started off. And I quickly realized that as I started to get more and more clients, that, again, I wasn't necessarily the expert in all these different facets. So I started to surround myself with other experts that if I identified a challenge within a company, I could refer them to one of my counterparts. So that's why I brought in David. David's an outstanding leadership coach. He's worked with a couple of the US presidents and been on their presidential staff team. I've got fractional CFO on my team, recruiter on my team. So as I come across challenges, I'm able to pass on that really good reference to my clients. And then it's the same with the peer group side. I established some peer groups initially, and now we've grown that by 70, 80%. And again, same thing where a lot of people will know generally most of them are in the landscape business. Most of them know some of the trade challenges going on, but they don't necessarily know business in terms of either leadership or marketing or some of the other things going on within the industry. So, being able to share some of that knowledge around all the different groups, again, goes back to my whole purpose in life. If I can help them make less mistakes and ultimately their business becomes more successful to a point where eventually they're working on the business, then I feel as though I've done my part.
Well, Robert, we're getting to that time. Can you maybe tell people where that they can reach out, how they can get in touch with you if they want to maybe get some coaching or just connect?
The best thing is to reach me through the website, the Radix Group LLC.com, or through my LinkedIn at Robert Clinkenbeard. So that's probably the two ways to contact me, and just be happy to chat to them and see how I can help them out. So I even do a lot of free initial consulting just to see if I can help them or not, and even just that 1.5 hour conversation can just steer people in the right direction. So happy to do that.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, who would you say is your ideal client if somebody was to try and come to you? Or is there a specific industry? Do you want to stay in landscaping, or do you help people from all walks of life?
I mean, I would say I focus mainly on the service industry. I'm just passionate about people that are just good, hardworking people, landscaping, pest control, janitorial, all those types of service industries. That reoccurring revenue is obviously a nice one because I feel as though I know that well. So that's probably the main. And size-wise, could be anywhere from, I have clients that are 3 million, I have clients that are 50 odd million. So yeah, I enjoy working with them all.
That's great. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been a great conversation. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. And thanks so much to everybody who tuned in this week and every week. And we'll see everybody next time.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan and Mike.